Hello, 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 and welcome back to yet another episode of Electricpreneur Secrets, episode 238. We're 7 or 8 episodes into this $1 million launch series, and today is a huge one. If you've been wondering why we haven't chosen our weapon yet, what vehicle we're running, we've been bootstrapping this thing, and we've managed to make some sales at this point, just using whatever vehicle we had. I'm your host, Clay Newmeyer. With me, as always, my esteemed co-host, Joseph Lucani. We are the Electricpreneurs, just a couple of master electricians with business addictions here to provide you with another freemium daily coach call. We're on a mission to get behind, 25,000 windshields this year. So if you know someone who needs to hear this, please pass that message on. Leave a review where you found it first. And you know what? Sit back, enjoy, and take everything we give. Just promise that you'll take action and report your wins back to us. Joe, how you doing today, my brother?
Man, there are some days that are better than others, but today is going to be a good one. I've got a very, very strong cup of coffee next to me. We had a great class this morning. I feel inspired because of all the lessons that came up in our classes. I love working with you on the daily. All I can say is I'm blessed, man. I'm feeling blessed today. What about you? How you holding up?
I love that. Yeah, feeling the same. In fact, earlier when we were on a meeting, I was thinking to myself, it'd be kind of cool to do an episode one day that just kind of is like a day in the life of Joe. Like follow you through the actual what you're doing day to day, because so many people, I think they get the mission, they get the vision that we're on, trying to rise the tide for this industry and really defeat this rat race once and for all. And I mean, this series helping new electricpreneurs get established and begin in really what we believe are like the building blocks of a business. I mean, what electrician doesn't start a business and go do residential service for someone?
I mean, we were actually talking about this earlier, and it's funny because we're like, how do you just start off in commercial? Like, you know what? I'm going to leave my company, assuming you don't have any ins or contacts. What are you going to go knock on some warehouse's door and be like, hey, you're looking for a relamp project? You're looking to low bid? I'm your guy. It's like residential, I can knock on every door and get a long lifetime valued customer. Why not start residential service?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of people kind of start with the GCs, start in honestly an unfavorable position. And we'll be careful not to go down this rabbit hole entirely today, but unfavorable meaning like at a rate they felt was fair based on this low rat race price that is already existing in the market from the moonlighters and the people running around charging $100 an hour or less, time and material, fighting for every penny, fighting to get paid. I mean, the problem is evident, man, and I'm just so glad to be here standing against it. So my thought that started all this again was like, how do we do that? It would be cool to kind of show a little background. I mean, you were talking about earlier even how every day starts with our options blitz post.
Exactly.
Like, most people don't actually know about this stuff, and it would be cool to explore that with you. So maybe a future series or show or two. Maybe it's a long one. I don't know, man. I don't know. But we digress. This series, or rather this episode, had to give you the chicken skin a little bit. Did we not make you think of your first vehicle coming into your business?
Yeah, it was funny because everyone has this story about their first death machine, but ours was actually a death machine. Her nickname was Big Bertha. She was this 14-foot old FedEx truck that didn't have a working odometer. It didn't have seats. It didn't have seat belts. It didn't have heat. It didn't have AC. It had nothing. It had nothing in it. We literally had to get Honda Civic seats from the dump, put them together with strut and 2x4s, bolt them to the floor and build a chassis frame, put the seats on top of it, get seat belts from another vehicle, put those in. But we were broke and we wanted to serve, and it was what we could afford. So for anyone who's going through and saying like, I don't have money to make it work, coming from someone who had literally no money, you can always make something work if you're willing to either invest time or money into it. There's always something to invest. You just invest what you have available. I have time, so that's what I put into it.
I love that. And a really powerful message there. It is kind of time or money, right? And I sort of learned that the other way coming up through the trade too. I remember a consultant saying to me, listen, Clayton, you've got either money or you've got time. You never have both. So it's like you get time off, but then you're out of money. You got a bunch of money, but you got no time off. So I can relate to that specifically. And I can remember the first vehicle that I was doing electrical work in, and it was like a 93 Chevy extended cab that I put a body lift in, like rusted out rocker panels and exhaust on it. Like, of course, as a young man, you prioritize lift, tires, and exhaust over safety of a vehicle.
Of course.
And that's kind of what I was driving around doing a couple of jobs. And yeah, so it's funny to reflect on that. But in this series now, with where we're headed, I mean, we're starting to make sales. And I understand you were in Big Bertha for a while. But now going forward, if you had to do it again, remember, we've solved some problems that you didn't quite have the understanding or the support to do back then. Hence why we're here. So now our pricing's right. We're making network sales. We've got our organic marketing fired up. People are starting to call. We're building a demand here at this point. This has got to be one of the next upgrades. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And if I can put a pin in that, it's that you can get a cheap van, and it will run and it will work. But what you're trading is the reliability, because you know that it's not if it will break, it's when it will break. And depending on how old and how shitty the van is, it's either going to go to the shop for a week or it's going to go there and that's its final resting place. So the thought you have to keep in mind is, yes, you can start with a very low income, very low cost van, but you have to also take the risk that if you have starting to get consistent jobs and you're realizing you're starting to sell yourself out 5 jobs a week, 10 jobs a week, if your van breaks, those jobs either have to be refunded or rescheduled. And when you don't have a ton of time, you could be rescheduling someone out a month. And that's how 100%. Jobs get lost just because your van wasn't working.
100%. Yeah, especially with something like engine or transmission troubles.
Yeah.
Just because those fixes are not immediate. Keep in mind, I'm shorthanded in mechanic trades too, quite often in your areas. So there could be a schedule delay, right? So valid point, the maintenance factor, the dependability factor. I know I've got some great suggestions for this show, but you also kind of jumped right into the van. And I'm wondering about that because I know a lot of people, including myself, really feel the pull for a truck.
And I can explain.
And we might be thinking, well, I'm going to do projects too, or I'm going to do other things. And trucks are more utility, right? For your personal life and for your family and for your recreation. But is that a trap that you would fall in again, Joe?
I'm going to swear by the van. I'm going to say I would go van every single time. And there's specific reasons why. Actually, 2 distinct reasons, if you don't mind me putting it in.
Of course.
One is that I personally believe that the image in what you show up in communicates what you'll be doing for the customer. And I can say, being guilty, I'd shown up in my own personal vehicle at times. Like there were times when I had a blue Honda Civic and I would show up because Big Bertha would die and we'd have to go put her in the shop somewhere. And I'd have my entire back cab loaded up with stuff and rolling up. It's a very different image. But the thing is that if you understand that your first sale, the first sale that really happens is when they see you pull into the driveway and they think to themselves, does this match the image of who I want in my home? So first is the image that you're going to go with. A van usually implies services being done today. Whereas a lot of times with a truck, it's not that it can't be, but there's a lot of extra effort that usually goes into it. It's either you have the cab that's completely loaded up, or you've got to do the outside build outs, or even if you need to get tools, you're crawling in the back. You're not walking comfortably. So that's the first thing there. The second comes down to if you're genuinely trying to work out of a truck, it's a little harder to do than working out of a van. So we've worked in all different kinds. I've had transits, I've had sprinters, we've had different styles of vans. But I found I really liked working with sprinters because when it's snowing or it's raining, I could walk into it. The back, I could literally walk in and you can build shelves from the floor to the ceiling. And the amount of stuff that you could fit in, you become having a mobile workshop on wheels compared to having, I've just got a cardboard box full of parts that I expected it to take. So you can come up far more prepared and you can work far more comfortably than if you could with a truck.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so just to be clear, a minivan wouldn't quite do it here.
And I can explain why.
Okay.
So I actually knew or I've worked with multiple different electricians that show up in minivans. And a lot of them would swear by it. And they'd be like, well, this is great on gas and this is comfortable and I can drive it on my own time. Like there was one guy who we worked with who loved to fish, and he had like this minivan and he gutted all the back seats. And he was like, well, I've got my fishing poles on the top and I've got my fishing gear on the right. And on the left of my van, I've got all. And the problem is a minivan communicates exactly that. A work vehicle should be used for work and should be solely dedicated to the most efficient and productive style of work, both in image, both in effectiveness, both in material storage. But when you show up in the truck, when you show up in the minivan, you're also communicating that this isn't your primary occupation with it. Because would you fully letter your minivan? Would it still have the same image showing up in a Honda Odyssey? Like it really wouldn't. But if I
100%, I 100% see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
The minivan just does not have the same working appeal. And granted, I'm biased as an electrician, but in any trade, someone who comes over in a minivan or something, that's kind of more casual than work just has that appeal. And keep in mind, this work is, this is another identity that we're staging up here. We're building up a whole other identity that gets to live through us. But that other identity needs to be work focused and service focused. And if it doesn't give a homeowner the impression of that service focus, then it's always going to fall short of your premium appeal.
100%. And I would say that also, there are some that are going to argue that you could use this for other things. Like, I'm going to make a business investment, but I'm going to do this with my family with it. But I'm going to tow my boat. Okay, that's well and good. Is this a lifestyle business or is this a premium service business? Because what you show up in is also going to communicate to the client what you have. If it looks like this is something that you're using to tow the RV and you happen to use it for work, it's very different than this is primarily used for work. Oh, and I have a lift onto it that I can use other things for.
100%. And where we're going is a deeper well of even further niches like generators, like you've mentioned, and further decals or decals, as some listeners might say, right? And further investment into that premium service. So for me, what you said about lifestyle versus business, I'm trying to build a premium service business that actually improves my lifestyle. So much so that I'm going to afford another vehicle. So for me, I feel like part of the challenge here is, and it's innate in humans really, to try to do too much with one thing, right? And this happens all over life. You ever go to shop for a boat? Well, you start to realize pretty quickly, wow, there's different kinds of boats for different purposes. And you've got to decide. There is no one boat suits all, just like there's no one van suits all. There's no one truck suits all. There's no one vehicle suits all. So why don't we focus on establishing a business that provides for us in a way that we can have the lifestyle we want without sacrificing in front of any customers?
I would agree.
Or sacrificing customers in general. I want to throw a disclaimer in. Can I do that?
Our show. Do what you want.
If you're like me, and in my past for many jobs I was doing, we're kind of off-road or in the country, or maybe you have a remote cabin and you're servicing the people around a lake, right? There's different, very sub-niche areas where you might decide that four-wheel drive is really important. Now, I understand there's four-wheel drive vans, but in some cases, hey, maybe the truck is a good fit. Just know what you're sacrificing there, and know that an in-town, in an urban area, premium service provider, you're going to be following Joe's advice. This van, full wrap, lots of color, no white, right? No white van scam, as we've talked about before, making sure that that right message, that right brand is there for all to see. Now, I recognize we're getting almost 15 minutes into this one already, but we've still got some important things to cover. Joe, what do you say? You into going a little long here today?
I'm down for it. I think this is one of those topics that people are really scratching their heads on, and it's such a big investment for a new company that it's worth making the right decision. So knuckle up, man. I'm ready to go.
Before we get into the investments and how, and maybe what that looks like, you did mention maintenance before, and that makes me think about, diesel.
Yeah.
How that could be more expensive too, and maybe a fuel type. I know you've got some thoughts on that too. So why don't you share away, my brother?
Sure. Okay. So I've purchased both diesel and gas vans, and I can say that there's pro and cons for both. And it really comes down to what your main priority is. So if your goal is strictly convenience, then gasoline is going to be the way to go. The reason being is that gas, like straight up just petrol gas mechanics, are far more common than diesel mechanics. In addition to it, every gas station has regular. Not every gas station has diesel. So there's two factors. One is that, can I fuel up wherever I go? And maybe that's not a huge concern in some other areas. But if it breaks, who am I taking it to? I personally liked diesel, but there was two things that were wrong with it. One was that it was very hard to maintain. And two, remember I told you in our area, the lowest I've ever seen is -30. So it's cold in the Hudson Valley. But the fact is that when you have diesel, you now need to ensure that either it's inside or that the glow rods inside the engine are physically maintained. Because otherwise, I've had to put space heaters in the front engine and like make sure that you have an extension cord off it into a plug and try to start this thing and let it run the engine warm because it just doesn't want to start because the glow rods aren't physically kicking on. Whereas with a gas engine, you wouldn't have that problem. So realistically, it comes down to diesel is always going to be harder to maintain. It is going to be harder to access. But the trade-off to diesel is that it's a far more reliable engine. If you showed up with a 300,000 mile engine in diesel, you could look at that and be like, yeah, this thing's still got life in it. If you showed up with a 300,000 mile gas truck or gas van, you're amazed this thing even survived at this point, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to comment on that a little bit, and I'm going to add something.
Sure.
So being that I live in the cold north, we have something installed called block heaters.
Yep.
And it literally screws into your block and plugs in, and most new vehicles come with that. Pretty strong likelihood if you live in a cold area and you're buying a diesel that these days that would be included.
Mm-hmm.
Understand you're also reflecting on an older vehicle, but I myself have had to use, different propane torches under vehicles, all sorts of shit to try to warm one up so that, yeah, exactly, the glow plugs and everything can work. And even just the viscosity of that oil allowing an engine to crank, or the batteries, there's a lot to starting a cold vehicle. The other piece was that there is, I've found at least, a mileage difference. A lot of times, especially in new age diesels, you go a lot further. I bought a diesel truck currently with a 6-cylinder Duramax in it, Chevy, that I'm getting 1,000 kilometers a tank, which roughly 800 miles a freaking tank out of this thing, which is going to be exceptional compared to a gas for the same, maybe 30-gallon tank kind of thing. Now that said, your resale value, if you ever want to resell this thing, the resale value is going to be held a bit higher in a diesel, from my experience, than a gas. But again, it's going to last the test of time and still have a value, even with, a couple 100,000 miles on it. So really important stuff there. Now, quickly, what do you think about some of the newer electric vans, Joe?
I like them for concept purposes. And the reason being is this. Let's say you decide to niche into electric vehicles. You are an EV specialist. I think it would be an incredible marketing piece for you to show up in an electric vehicle. So that's first and foremost.
Yeah.
So if that's your niche, it would be a great marketing investment to do so.
Product market fit.
Exactly. The next thing with electric vehicles, it really comes down to what kind of area you're going to be in and what kind of commute time you're going to be working in. Because if you were to be fully lettered and wrapped and you go to the charging stations to now charge it, you're now advertising to everyone who's in that area that you also have this availability. Now, because it's a new technology, obviously they cost more. It's not like you can go find a 10-year-old EV truck when they only just came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
So from a price standpoint, you would either have the means of leasing it, buying it, or renting it. Renting is not really an option when you run the business. So it's either can you lease a new one or lease a used one, or can you purchase one that's aftermarket? So for a bootstrap operation, you'd have to have the means of lines of credit in order to afford it or have a strong nest egg. So for a bootstrap operation, unless you had deeper pockets, I wouldn't recommend it for the first start. But if for a long-term vision for a targeted market approach, I think it could be very effective.
Yep. And now that we're into that, I'm going to leave the EV where it sits. I mean, my personal opinion on EV is I'm not bought into the whole process. And the process I'm talking about is more the circular economy of it, just because I know some background. And I just about said blackground because of the black mass that comes from the batteries that actually takes an incredible process to then recirculate and reuse into batteries. Like the recycling process is not where it needs to be. We're creating a massive problem still with EVs. And of course, when it gets cold, you lose a lot of your mileage from heat requirements, etc. That said, you tied us perfectly into this, buy versus rent versus lease conversation. And I'm happy to kick this one off if that's all right.
By all means, go for it.
I personally feel that if we're starting this company, which we are live, right? This is a real debate. You guys get to hear it here first. Joe and I will make a decision about what vehicle and how we're going to accomplish that. There is a company that I've used several times in Canada, and they're called Driving Force. And because they exist here, I'm usually have a feeling that they exist or a similar service exists down south of the border, because they have a powerful market differentiator. And that is, unlike the main three like Chev, Ford, Dodge, they don't lock you into a low mile lease with a bunch of restrictions that cause you to have big payouts in the end. What they do is uniquely, they actually wrap all that stuff in and allow you, even encourage, they even helped me every time I bought a truck with them or leased a truck from them. They would take it to the mechanic shop and put a lift in it if I wanted. They would get the shelves put in. They would do all of that for me so that what I got to do was just arrive and actually use the vehicle, like take it to work that day. And so by taking all of that off of our plate, we were able to be most effective and get a brand new van, truck, etc., for a locked-in lease payment. But there's a couple other advantages here, if I may.
By all means, I'm interested.
Soft credit check. They didn't report monthly. And so what that means is it didn't affect my debt to income ratio. So it actually gave me an upper hand in a credit standing, because I was making a $800 to $1,200 payment for my new truck a month, but that the bank couldn't see it. So when I'd go back to the bank, they couldn't see that I was leasing this vehicle, meaning it wasn't impacting, again, that debt to income ratio.
So you could leverage your credit harder. I like that a lot. That's actually a really big advantage, especially when you have almost no money.
Furthermore, in Canada, what it means is versus financing a vehicle outright, where they would calculate all sales tax ahead of time, in a lease situation, the sales tax was based on the amount of the payment every month. And that was an entire write-off anyway. So I was actually financing a smaller portion of the vehicle with a buyout option somewhere in 3 to 5 years that we already programmed, based on the amount of mileage we assumed we would have on the vehicle and the value of that vehicle at that point. So all other things felt like ownership. They just wanted proof of insurance, so they knew they were never in a bad spot. It didn't affect debt to income ratio, and it was a better tax position for us. That plus the convenience, they were premium service providers, having the wrap done, having my tools and everything loaded in it for me. To me, it was like, I don't need to go anywhere else.
I'm pretty impressed, because in all honesty, my brain does two things here. It's like, okay, so you got a convenience factor. We've leased it, so it's a lower monthly payment. We've had shelves that are built into it. We've had situations where now it's being depreciated and then purchasing at a depreciated price. So all these things sound good. The only thing that really throws me on it is that when I first started in my vans, we built shelves. We didn't buy shelves. We didn't have boxes like the little plastic tins. We had boxes from Home Depot, cardboard boxes for our stuff. So I guess it really comes down to how low is the budget. If you had the means of doing an $800 to $1,000 payment, what you're suggesting is 100%, I think, the way to go. Provided that there's not like a huge damage clause. Like if you were like, hey, I got hit, someone T-boned me from the side. Now I'm out because it's not under their coverage.
Yeah.
But provided there's no sticky fine print and we can afford it, I'd like your way. If
And
we
so
had,
if that service provider agreed to increase the price based on the shelves and stuff that they would just install, and it would be an extra $75 on our monthly payment, what would you say then, brother?
oh, you're using my own words then. I love it. Yeah. It's like, what would happen? What would happen then if we were to have that done, Joe? For $75 a month, you don't have to take the time working and building shelves in the cold. But maybe you do like building shelves in the Joe. You sure? But so yeah. So the fact is yes, if we could do it where everything's pre-assembled and we had the means of funding it, then I would say that the leasing of this van would be far better. Additionally, there's also a major factor that we haven't considered, or that maybe we haven't strengthened enough in this argument, which is, are we leasing a newer vehicle? Because if we are, then there's also a drop off in the downtime in it. Mm-hmm. Because if I purchased a shitty van for $2,000 to $3,000, I expect that there's going to be several weeks of downtime throughout the year, thus causing a job loss. And that needs to be factored against what the increase in monthly cost is to the lease. So yeah, you know what, $1,000 a month, it's $12,000 at the end of the year. But if I buy a $3,000 van, I'm certain I'm going to have at least $2,000 to $3,000 in costs. But 100%. The downtime is really what eats your profit margin.
For me, this is such an important part. And I know we're so late in this episode, but it's such an important part in this conversation because so many people are really against having debt or owing money. And we want to kind of own this stuff outright. But the displacement of today's capital can actually be less by buying new, with more assurance with the warranties and everything that's included, or leasing new, that you just know you're taken care of, less downtime, as you mentioned, and you're just there showing up in a new vehicle with that premium service feel. And tell me that's not going to change the smile on your face.
I mean, if I can put my own personal situation in, is that every personal vehicle I buy is brand new. And there's a specific reason for that. And that's tying into what you're saying. It's, I feel better in this new vehicle, and how I feel affects how I'm going to present myself to my clients. So as an example of, if I show up and I'm in a brand new van and it is wrapped and I step out of that van and I am uniformed, I have presented as a 10. And that presentation will allow me to get a sale where I may not have in the past. And that newfound sale now justifies the purchase of the van because it's an image representation. When you get stuck behind me in traffic, when you pull next to me on the highway and you see me and you see what we're driving and you see the van, you see everything that's connected to it, that stays in your mind too. So it's not just the A to B cost. You also can factor in the marketing and the community exposure that goes into it. How do you want to be remembered?
I think what I'm even hearing then is paying more now, representing wholly, giving into this vision and just committing is actually going to help us offer more options. It's going to help us serve at a higher level. It's going to help remind us of who we really are. And my brother, that reminds me that this is not a mission to bootstrap. It's a mission for premium service. And as $1 million launch in our first year, I'm kind of sold here because there's a couple other things that we got to full circle back. Remember we were talking about our organic marketing and setting up this website in our Google?
Yeah.
Our vehicle is going to be pictured in there too, isn't it?
It is. Right in front of a house when someone wraps it.
Remember how we said our organic marketing isn't just about getting customers, but it's also going to pave the way for our next staff?
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to prefer, the old beater van with a wrap or a brand new vehicle to run?
I remember some of our vans, the heat would run when you turn the AC on because they were so shitty. So they literally would have to disconnect the fuse from the front engine during the summer so that the heat wouldn't blow on them. So yeah, I can say with firsthand experience, you have a tech who's got a brand new comfy van with working AC. Yeah, they're going to feel way better and they're going to want to be in that van today.
Okay. So I think we're coming to an agreement here. For me, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I feel we're at. barring any credit issues that we may encounter, keep in mind, we likely are still a sole proprietorship just to launch this thing. We did a DBA or whatever form we talked about before just to get off the ground and not worry about anything else right now. This is going to come down to personal credit.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm so convicted in this truth, and we're going door to door selling people every day. And I don't mean like door to door cold sales. I just mean in every door we go to, this is what we do with the conviction of premium service. So I'm prepared to get a co-signer for this if I need to.
Your mom got to sign for it. Your mom got to sign for it. But whoever's got to do it, whoever has to do it, we're going to do. Because at the end of the day, I would rather make the investment in something to prevent paying money or frustration in the future. I may have to bend things. I may have to call favors. I may have to put up more cash from my personal savings. But I know that I'd rather put money down now than spend time later. Because that time, as we grow bigger, is going to become an extremely valuable commodity that doesn't go up, it goes down. So if we can preserve our future time, we're actually preserving future sanity just as much as future sales.
Nice, man. Wow, this has been a thorough conversation. Is there anything else you want to add to this before we crank out a couple of action items?
Anything I think I'm going to add is just going to add more avenues for us to want to go down into. And for the sake of time, we can always pen that into other episodes.
I think there's a ton of value here, man. Yeah. I'm prepared to kick this off.
Go for it.
This is kind of an analytical one. You guys have a decision to make. Whether you believe in the decision we've come to or not, you've got your own situation to deal with. We have that level of conviction because this is the life we live every day. We're helping premium service providers stand up, take that stand for themselves and what they believe in, and seeing that change. So of course we have a bias. Is it right for you? You're going to have to break out the back to the pricing math here, get back to your own credit, and just start writing this stuff down and decide, okay, who am I? Where am I going? What can I do here? And all we're going to encourage is do your best to show up and look your best, but it starts with your own personal situation. So if you're unclear on any of this, go back, listen again, ask us any questions. That basic is huge, I know, but it starts with knowing your own situation and making a decision. Joe, are you thinking of an all-star to go with that?
I got something to work with.
All right, man.
So if we were going to go off an all-star for when it comes to van purchasing, what I really want to do is say, you need to make sure that this is not just a short-term decision. Like, it's weird to think about, but like, your money that you're putting into this is worth something. Yes. But the all-star action is I want you to have almost a future sight to you. And what I need you to consider is, am I willing to take the time now or take the investment now to prevent a future problem? Now, why this is so important is because have you ever had a situation where you delayed something today and had to deal with it tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
How do you usually feel when you're in that moment? And you're like, if I had only done this, if I had only done that.
Regretfully.
Exactly, right? I would rather, because your van is going to be the biggest investment you make in the beginning of your business. So if you're going to take this on, it shouldn't be an impulse purchase. The all-star action I have for you today is saying, if you're going to do this, do it with the intention that I would rather spend tomorrow's money than spend tomorrow's time.
I like that. Very good, man. This has been action-packed, jam-packed value, and another episode 238, the $1 Million Startup Series, choosing your weapon, what to consider, why. And I think we must have gotten you just a little bit closer to your own $1 million launch, or maybe helping you in making this decision at least. Another episode of Electricpreneur Secrets, where we keep showing up to help you master your sales, simplify your pricing, and deliver premium level electrical service. And I can't wait to continue this tomorrow, Joe.
I can't wait, man. It's going to be a great episode. Y'all take care.
Cheers.